Hello. Hi. I am Opal Mitchell. Forgive me, the light I'm using is reflecting in my glasses and it's going to be kind of distracting for me. But I have to use the light, otherwise it looks really dark in here. I work for the Central Arkansas Library System at the Nixon branch in Jacksonville. I'm the assistant manager here and the adult programmer. And today I'm doing a sewing program called Sewing 101. I had a coworker encourage me to do this program because I was telling her that every time I went to Walmart here in the last 3 or 4 weeks, actually, Walmart sold out of sewing machines, which I thought was pretty interesting. And I thought, wow, everyone's buying sewing machines and I guess making masks or just, you know, learning a new hobby because they're stuck at home. And she said, well, you know, there's going to be a lot of people with questions about their sewing machine. Why don't you do a program? And hi, Angela. So I was like, okay, I guess that would be a fun thing to do. Because I know when I've bought my first sewing machine, I had ideas of things I wanted to do, but I really didn't know anything about sewing, even though I grew up with a mother that was a seamstress for a really big part of my life. She was a seamstress working at the cleaners here in Jacksonville, I think Price's Cleaners, and she made all kinds of stuff for us, but I don't know, as a kid I just never really paid any attention to what she was doing. You know, I saw her doing it, but I didn't really show any real interest in learning until I became an adult. So I understand what it's like in the beginning when you have a new machine and you want to make stuff, but you can't figure out why it's not working the way you want it to work, and it's a little intimidating in the beginning, but trust me, the more you use your machine, the more comfortable you're going to get with using it. Hi, Shay. She's watching too. So don't give up. If you're a little frustrated, you got a new machine, it's not doing the things that you want it to do, just take heart. Love your manual because believe it or not, I know I hate reading stuff like that too because things don't always make sense to me whenever I read it. But there are some usually halfway decent pictures in there showing you what you should do if this happens, or what you should do, especially with tension whenever you're sewing. So I'm going to show you just very basics today. I'm going to try to do this every week on Friday at 1. And today I'm going to introduce you to, we have several different types of sewing machines here at the library, so they're all a little different. So I know that everybody's sewing machine is going to be a little different. So I'm just going to go over the basics of it real quick, kind of showing that there's different machines that have different bobbins, the way that they're loaded in the machine. The way that you thread your machine is going to be a little bit different on the different machines depending on which one you have. So I'm going to kind of show you the different models that are out there and kind of basically how they're threaded, how to know if, say you're sewing along and something's not working right, what to look for and what to do to fix the problem. To kind of understand what might be going on to cause the issue that you're having. That's one of the hardest things in the world when you're new to sewing and you don't have anyone around you to help you when you're having problems. And it's really frustrating because you could sit there for hours trying to figure it out and just not understand what's going on. I had that happen quite a bit in the beginning whenever I first started sewing. What helped me a great deal was bringing my machine to a friend that was a quilter, and I just sat down and worked on a project with her. And I didn't get the project done, but because I was having issues, but she helped me figure out what to do when I was having the issues in order to fix my problem. And that's the hardest thing that you have to learn in the beginning. Once you know what to look for and what you need to adjust in order to get your machine working, is a lifesaver, because when you don't have anyone around to ask, then you're just spinning your wheels a lot of times because some of the written directions are not the best in the world. I will encourage you to check out videos on Google or on YouTube. If you're having a particular problem with your machine, Google it. More than likely someone's had the exact same problem or someone's done a video on it. I found all kinds of great videos, even on how to thread my great-grandmother's treadle sewing machine. And it's a very unique sewing machine. It's a Davis vertical feed, which there was only so many of those made. And I was shocked that there was videos that people had made on how to thread it, how to wind a bobbin, because those are just so different to the modern machines. When I looked at it and I had pieces of a manual, I still had no clue. So trust me, if you've got internet, Google some of these problems, because I think you are going to find that someone is going to be able to show you how to fix it. But I'm going to get started and show you the machines that we have here, and I think you should have something really similar. We've got a Singer, we've got several Brothers, and a Genomi, which I think I'm pronouncing it wrong. It's probably don't pronounce the E, but we've got one of those. Yes, YouTube is wonderful. Someone was just mentioning YouTube is my friend. Yes, it is my friend too. So I'm going to turn the camera around and I'm going to walk you through the different machines we have here. I'm hoping we can have enough of different ones that it's got to be one that's really somewhat similar or close to what you've got. So if you are having issues with figuring out what's going on with just getting it threaded, and how to wind your bobbin and how to load your bobbin, because not all the machines are the same. So I'm going to show you that. We don't have any electronic ones, and those are the little bit fancier ones that have digital things on it. I think those could be probably pretty intimidating too, but we don't own one like that here, so forgive me. You probably would have to Google that particular model and everything, and you should be able to find some videos helping you out with that. So let me switch this around, and I'm going to have to turn my camera around too. So let's turn this back around because I need the light to light up what we're going to be doing, because should be able to see. This light is very helpful on illuminating everything. This is the first one we have here. This is a Singer, and its thread is loaded on the back side like this. Not all of them are like this. Quite a few of the other ones, the place for the thread is up and down back behind it, and the rest of the ones we have here are like that, and that works just as well. Just be sure this piece that you put on the end of it, it keeps it where it's somewhat loose and not real. You don't want it real tight where it can't spin. So be careful about that. This one's a very basic model. It only has a couple of knobs on the front, and it has the reverse here. You can find the reverse in all different places on all different machines. Some of them have it down here. Some of them have it up there. But they're all going to be threaded this pretty much the same method basically. So, oh good, that's your machine. All right, so I'm going to take, this was not quite threaded all the way, it came undone. This is something we were using in the class, and so I'm going to lay the thread. It's already loaded on the back here. Like I said, you want it to be somewhat loose, but you don't want it real loose. And generally, all of these machines are going to have pictures and numbers of what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to tilt this so you can see. On the top here, it shows you this is number 1. This is what you do first. So when you're threading it, you're going to thread it through this little metal piece right here. Now, right here, it does point the thread this direction. Well, that's when you're winding your bobbin, because the thing for winding your bobbin is on this end. So see, there's number 2 for that. So that's for that one. Now, see how these numbers are different? That's got a black dot over it, and then one over here had a black dot. Well, this one doesn't have a black dot, so you're going to know that you're going to thread it through here, and then underneath this little plastic piece right here is what the picture's showing. And then you're going to bring it down here. Now that's number 4, so don't worry about it. You go down here, and here's your number 2. You can't really see it from that far away, so I'll bring it up. So there's number 2, and there's number 3. It's going to loop under, And then if you can't see this metal, let's see, you're going to loop it over the top of this metal piece right here. I'm going to move it up and down so you can see it. You want it at the highest position, so always turn it where it's at the highest position. Does it matter what thread? I've just been using the cheap one. I'm glad you asked that question. Yes, it does matter. I would recommend, if you were going to use the cheapest brand, I would recommend using is Coates & Clark. That's a middle of the road thread that's not cheap, but not on the real expensive side. It's one of those middle of the road threads that, like, I started out with that one too. I would not use any of the brands that you can see a lot of fuzz coming off of it. Let me think here. I think we got rid of all of our thread that was like that. Let me grab, because it's going to be kind of hard showing you the thread we have on the machine. So let me grab. If you want to go with, oops, I'm trying to clip my pen back on me here. That's got my microphone. One of the better brands, like the expensive type, this is one of the more expensive ones. And I've been buying it for the library because these machines get heavily used, and it's better to use a better brand on one that's being used a lot, because these don't have, you can't really see. Oh, that's wound together too. Okay. Let me try to pull it off of here. Someone did something strange to this. It's supposed to only come off here. Okay. If you look at this thread, there's no fuzzies of any kind coming off of that thread. If you've got some thread at home that you can literally see fuzz on the thread itself, then that's going to eventually kind of gum up your machine. So to avoid having to have your machine cleaned real often, I would recommend getting at least the middle of the road one, like the Coates & Clark. And if you want to get some really nice thread, there's another brands besides this. This is a German thread. This was recommended to me by a friend of mine that quilted, and she said this was a really good thread. And so that's what I've been using, and I really like it. I have a bunch of Coates & Clark at home that I'd gotten that's like multicolored, all different colors. I use those still because it's a decent brand. It still has a tiny bit of fuzz, but it's not as bad as the really cheap ones. So that's what I would go with. And I would look in your manual too that you have that came with your machine, because I discovered that, you know how they tell you can send your machine off to have it cleaned? Well, there's some basic cleaning you can do yourself. That's there's directions in your manual showing you how to take apart this area down here to take your plate out and so forth. A lot of fuzz will end up inside of your machine from just the fabric. So even if you have good thread, you still can get fuzz in there from the fabrics that you're sewing. So if you're working with a lot of fuzzy type fabrics, like I don't know, we had we were doing some hats and some scarves and stuff that we had some fleece type material. That fleecy type material can, and flannel, they can tend to have fuzz in them too. And the fuzz from that fabric can get down in your machine too from sewing. So occasionally, don't be afraid. The first time I did it to mine, I was really paranoid about taking it apart. But you're going to have pictures that show you how to take the plate off. And with this one, you can actually, oh wow, yours is a lot better. Mine does not have the bobbin in here like this. So yes, the manual is important. Shay, yeah, it is very important. You need to hang on to that manual. I have referred back to my manual several different times on different occasions for recommendations that the manual make for different types of needles. that you will need for different types of sewing. When I was working with jersey material, there is a particular needle that is better to use on jersey material. And I swapped my needle out, and I had bought a bunch of just basic needles for different things. Let's see, Shay, my thoughts too. I'm sorry, I was just looking at what people were saying to each other. Right, let me find my manual. So this is really nice as far as cleaning, and I will tell you, cleaning this out under here, they tell you not to use canned air to clean it out. I'm bad. I use canned air. I ignore them, and I understand why they tell you not to, because if you tilt the canned air, liquid can come out of it. So I'm not recommending using that to blow out the fuzz and stuff, because it is actually a no-no, and I do it all the time, because I'm like, oh, I know how to do it without the liquid coming out, but I'm sure there's something else that probably comes out too that's probably not good. But it's good for electronics, right? So it should be okay. But so I don't recommend it. So there are little brushes that you can buy to brush out the fuzz and stuff that's in here, and that's really what's recommended. I'm going to have to leave this microphone off because I'm having to take it off several different times. I think I'm just going to leave it hooked up to this. Let me show you real quick. Some sewing machines come with these if you got a nice one. I didn't get one with mine, but you can buy these little brushes. Sometimes they're smaller than this. This was one that came in a set that I bought that was for Singer. But you can use this to get your fuzz out of there, and it's always good to take the bobbin out, and you can brush that area too, and just get all the fuzz out of the area that it will accumulate in there. So there's different types of sets that you can buy. That just happened to be the one I was able to get a hold of. So, all right, I'm going to go ahead and thread this machine real quick, which I have a feeling. Are you having any issues with threading it, Marcia? Or is that like old news to you as far as you don't have any problems with it? It's pretty straightforward. Most machines are about the same. The hardest part, remembering sometimes, is to move this piece all the way at the top so you can make sure that you get it over it. And then, of course, they had number 5 here, and then you always remember to put it behind this little bar. So I'm gonna, and most machines have that little bar. Do you see where the thread is behind it? If you don't get it on that, and that's one of the very last things you do before you thread it through the needle, then you're gonna have problems because your tension is not going to be right. And if your tension is not right, then yeah, that's gonna be problems. How often and where should you oil? Actually, you're really, a lot of the stuff I've seen and read, they pretty much say don't oil it. Even my mother, she rarely oiled up her machine, and she used hers all the time. And if you do oil it, I mean, it's just tiny little drops. I would recommend, if you are having issues and stuff, really keeping it clean is the best. You're not really going to have to oil it if you keep it cleaned. Generally, oh, or am I jumping ahead? Let's see. Oh, you're not really jumping ahead. I really, truly don't think you're going to need to oil your machine. I bought oil too. The only time I've ever oiled, used my oil was not on my sewing machine. I used it. Let me show you. I did a little bit of quilting. I was trying to learn how to quilt, and when you quilt, you use a walking foot. My walking foot was squeaking, And so, I mean, I dropped just a tiny bit in there. I mean, I didn't have to use hardly any at all. And that's the only thing I've ever had to oil. After having your machine for years and years and years, you probably will get to the point that you might need to oil it. I honestly don't have an answer for where you're supposed to. Yeah, okay, comparing it to a spinning wheel. Yeah, you would want to put it in the places where the moving parts are, but you are not going to use very much at all. And I don't foresee a lot of you really needing to oil it, because if you put too much, it can really gum it up. So, and some of the mechanics up in here that you would need to have oiled, they make it purposely hard for you to open these machines up and get into them, because they want you to take them to people that do repair work on them. I would almost, if your machine has gotten to the point that it does need to be really cleaned out really good and oiled, I would almost recommend taking it to a reputable person to have it cleaned up and oiled. But like I said, my mother, the sewing machine that she has, I mean, and she did lots and lots of things all the time, and she rarely had to oil hers, because I asked her the same thing, and she said, no, it's not something that you do real often. And she said, and you're not going to use that much either at all when you do. But I would just Google it and see, because all the machines are a little bit different, and it's going to be where the moving parts are, which is going to be up in the machine here. And the one time I tried to get into one of our machines here, it was kind of difficult. It was the Genomia, and because it had thread getting broken inside of it and wound around the inside. And it was difficult getting it open, and I had a really hard time finding anything that showed you how to even do that. Actually, I don't think I found a video that showed me. I think I just kind of had to figure it out on my own. But I'm going to finish threading this machine because I wanted to show you. You're really supposed to be really careful about all of this, but I'm not being particularly careful, I know. But I'm going to take the bobbin out real quick and showing how to do that. So some of you are going to have bobbins like this. This is kind of what the older machines, like my mother, the one that she has. It's one of those. She's got one of the older metal ones that actually it has a lid that goes over the top, and you have latches on the side to close it. So hers is a really heavy-duty one, and this is what is pretty typical of the older machines. So you'll find some that are like this, and some that you have a drop-in bobbin on the top. And this is one that you get from the side. I'm going to pop it out, just in case we have any new people who are having issues with this. So this is your bobbin, and occasionally you might have to tighten this little bitty screw right there. But that's not going to be very often. When you first got your machine, don't worry about it. Unless you change, read your manual, because it will tell you when you need to tighten it and when to loosen it, and it's going to have to do with your tension when you're sewing. If you ever notice that when you're sewing and you're looking at your fabric, let's see if I've got some. When you're looking at something that you've sewn, and this is not a very good example because this one was sewing okay, you can see just the thread from that side, and you don't see any little pieces of thread popping through, which so you're only seeing the thread from one side on this, on each side. When your tension's off, you're going to see a little bit of the thread from this side popping over, or vice versa. That's when you know something's going on, that your tension's off. And depending on what side you're seeing it on, that's going to depend on what you're going to adjust on your machine as far as tension. And your manual will tell you if this is what you're going to have to adjust, depending on where the thread is popping up on, what side of the fabric, what side it's on. So I'm going to show you real quick on how to thread this type of bobbin. I've got the thread coming over on this side, not on the back side. It's coming in this direction here. It's going this way. And see, that's how you want it to line up, in that direction. There's a little bitty piece right there where it's going to go in. You're going to pull it down over the top and then through till it pops into place in between there, which I know that's kind of hard to see because my camera is having trouble. But it came through there, but it started on this. I started it up here. That's, just ignore that thread. That's the one that's on the bobbin itself. But that's the proper way of loading your bobbin, the one that's like this. And I'm going to tilt this down just a little bit. Oops, wrong one. So we can see. And you're always going to pay attention to, these are different. So I'm going to have to lower this, because you're going to need to be able to see down in here better. There we go. Let me tighten that up. All right. So see how everything needs to be lined up? You want all of this. Ooh. Let's see if we can see better. Where everything is kind of lined up together. And you want this little piece right here that's sticking straight up in the air. And we're going to move that thread out of my way. And you're going to open this. And it's going to click into place. And it's just going to wiggle. But it's going to hold into place. If it's not holding into place, then you didn't pop it in correctly. And everything has to be lined up correctly down in here in order for that to work. You have to have that opening at the top for this to fit right up in there. If it's not all lined up properly, that's not going to work. So you're going to hold on to this thread up here, and the knob on the side of your machine here, right here. This is a really big thing that I noticed all new people to sewing. One of the biggest mistakes that they will make is when they're turning this knob, they want to turn it towards you, this way, like this direction, which is counterclockwise. You always want to turn it clockwise, which is away from you. Always, always, always. Because if you turn it towards you, it's gonna, oops. Oh, it came unthreaded. I did not thread my, my eyes, I tell you what. I'm gonna get some scissors. I really thought I had it threaded, and I so didn't have it threaded. That thread got way too long on me. All right. And it's always easier if you go ahead and lower this pressure foot whenever you're trying to thread your machine, if it doesn't have one that automatically threads for you. I wish I had one of those. Okay, so now that we've got that, I'm going to turn that knob towards me and then all the way back up again. And then if you notice they're not coming loose, keep turning until it does. Oops, there we go. And you can use your scissors or a seam ripper to pull it loose like that. And if you have problems with that, take it out and do it again. Over and over again until it feels comfortable to you. Because that's one of the things you're going to do the most often, and so you need to get a lot of practice at it. And you'll feel a little bit better about swapping out different colors of thread instead of just sticking with the white thread all the time. You'll be more confident about using different ones and trying different threads. Now be sure that when you're buying thread too, that you don't make a mistake that I made on my very first machine. Do not get hand quilting thread. Don't do it. That is for hand quilting. It is not for a sewing machine. It is way too heavy, way too thick. It looks really nice. You're like, oh, that won't break. That'll be some really nice thread. No, it's way, 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 way too thick for a sewing machine and too heavy. So it may look nice, but it really is meant for hand sewing, because some people do quilt with that. And if you want to buy some just to use it for maybe sewing up something, to have a nice closure or something, sure, but don't ever put it on your machine. Okay, so that's this machine. So that's the basics of that, and I will stress to you again, because I noticed that was a big mistake that a friend of mine was making. She constantly wanted to turn the knob on the side of her machine towards her. I would sit right next to her while she was sewing, and I would have to say, Judy, you're doing it again. Don't turn it this way, not towards you, always away from you. Because what it's going to do is the needle's going to go down into the machine, and it's going to pick up threads that it shouldn't, and it's going to get gummed up in there and stuck. And she said in home ec, she used to tear up the sewing machines in home ec. I'm like, well, that's probably what you were doing, because that will mess it up. Okay, so I'm going to do something that you always do after you thread a machine. You're going to take a piece of, let's see. Oh, yeah. I was just reading what someone said. Yeah, Shay, yeah. It's, yeah, it really will get your threads knotted up underneath there. And another common mistake that will end up when you're sewing, if you end up with like a bird's nest, what I call, it's where a bunch of thread ends up on the bottom of your fabric and it kind of gets hung up in there a little bit. More than likely what you didn't put this down. If you don't put this down and you start sewing, that'll happen every time. If you start going, it will get very bird's nest looking underneath there really quick. Now if it gets if your pressure foot's down and that happens, then more than likely you have turned the other knob towards you when you got started instead of away from you, and it got hung up. So sometimes when that happens, you can't hardly pull this fabric out from under here. You'll lift the foot. Go ahead and turn this knob until you can kind of pull it loose a little bit away so you can get your fabric out of the way. You may not be able to pull it all the way out, but you should be able to pull it out enough to cut loose your threads. And once you cut loose your threads, you want to leave a few long ones so you can pull those loose ones out from under there. But you know, that's some of the things that can happen. All right, keep all of your leftover fabric when you're cutting things. Keep them like different strips and stuff handy. Get a little basket and throw them in there, especially if you're working with different types of fabric. Like this is just regular cotton, and this is some of the fleece type stuff that we have, that we've worked with. Even if you can't do anything with it, keep it and throw it to the side. If you think you're ever going to use that fabric again, do that. Let's see, yes. I think I have a tension issue. I'm sorry, I'm just reading Angela's question. That is my issue. Now, is it happening all the time when you sew, or just every once in a while when you're sewing? I'm kind of curious. And what type of machine do you have? Do you have one that's got the bobbin like this one, or is it the type that you drop your bobbin in on top? I'm kind of curious. And I was going to offer too, if you wanted me to look at your machine, we have a Zoom account with the library that's for adult programming. I could always, if you wanted to do like a video chat with me, or Angela, I'm friends with you on Facebook, we could always do like a live chat with each other through Messenger if you wanted to do something like that, and you could kind of show me what your machine's doing if you'd like. I'd be happy to do that. Bird's nest every once in a while. Okay. Do you think, have you ever noticed turning the knob on the side towards you? at any time, or you're probably not noticing that you're doing that, because it is something. I have a bobbin case. So you've got one of that's got one of these then, I think. Okay. I'm wondering if it has something to do with you turning the knob in the wrong direction occasionally and not noticing that you're doing it. I'm wondering, because that seems to be, because you only have to do it a little bit. The needle only has to go down in there and then come back up again from turning it the wrong direction, that it can cause that problem. Because I've had that happen occasionally too. And honestly, it could also be something that you didn't notice. Like when we're setting up threading this top area here, I've noticed when I've had that issue where I had the bird's nest, something wasn't looped correctly. Like I was sewing, I undid something. Let's see. I would appreciate it because I've threaded white in the top and the black in the bottom. Let's see. Yeah, kids will do that. They will mess with your machine. Yeah, I bet. The kids. Yeah, I would blame it on the kids. Because they will. Terry, the children's programmer here, she's had her little boy, she set her machine in the floor, and he's been playing trains a lot lately, and he's like seeing all these knobs on the sewing machine, and he had a field day. She didn't realize it. Yeah, that'll do it. That's another thing that will do it to you. I'm guessing he probably did that, or she did that to your machine. Got something a little off. And if you're in the middle of sewing and it does it, generally you might have got going a little fast and something may have come a little, like one part of this, the way it's set up, the way you have it threaded, one little something came loose when you were sewing and you didn't, because that's happened to me before. And so the best thing to do whenever that happens it's really best, if you're not sure what's going on, because I've had it happen a lot to me, just completely start from scratch. That is the best thing in the world to do, to completely unthread your machine, to take your bobbin out, take everything out, and just start over. And also inspect your bobbin, because, let's see here. I was going to save this later, but I'm going to do this now. Because if your bobbin is not quite wound right, like see how this one, it's not as obvious, but it's really not a whole lot wound on this very end, but then there's more over here. Try to keep as even of a bobbin as possible when you're winding it. Don't let it get real heavy on one side. That can make a huge difference on sewing. So you want to have a nice even bobbin. So I've had that happen in my class before, where people, I'd look at the bobbin and go, there might be a few little threads hanging here and there, and it just wasn't very like even bobbin, and even this one too. You want to keep it pretty much even across the board when you're winding it, because the more balanced it is, the less issues you're going to have. And never ever buy any of these. These will not work in your machine. They are the wrong size. So I thought these were really cool. They were already wound and everything. They're the wrong size for your machine. So we ended up having to, I tell people in my class all the time, just use it for hand sewing, because that's all it's good for, because these are not the right size. They're too narrow. If you look at that, see how much smaller they are? Not for our sewing machine. That will not work. So do not, be very careful about getting something like this. I would recommend just buying the blank bobbins. If you're really paranoid about getting the right kind, get the kind that's for your machine. Like I think Singer sells them, brother sells them. You don't have to buy the brand, but I will tell you to look at them very carefully if you buy the metal ones. This one's completely wound, so you can't really tell. Let me see if I got a blank one. Let's see. I have some at home. These are really good looking ones, but I have some bobbins at home that are just generic. This one is nice. It's very straight, but I've got some at home where they're a little bent on one side. They're not completely straight. So if you get any, inspect them, especially if it's an off-brand and not a name brand. Inspect them very carefully to make sure that they're very level. If you get any that are not level, then that's going to be a bad bobbin for you. It's going to not wind correctly, and it's not going to come off. It's going to move around too much and be wobbly on the inside of your machine. So you want some that are very, very straight. So as long as you do that, even if you don't get a name brand, just make sure, and they are cheaper than buying the name brands, just don't use the ones that don't look real straight. Just, throw it away, or, they're really not useful in any way. So be careful about that. And the plastic ones, too, are the same way. You got to make sure they're the right dimensions, the right size. So if you currently have some at home, if you buy it, just don't take it out of the box, and see if you can kind of set it up next to it and see if it's the same size, even with the plastic ones, to make sure it's the same size all the way around. Because if they're not, it will not work in your machine, and you'll have all kinds of issues. Okay. Oh, yeah. Yes, the bobbins can cause that problem. The little nesting issue. Check the size of it. See, compare it to the ones that came with your machine, and see. They may be off just a little bit on the size. It may not just be quite right. Yeah, that could be it. Yeah, that could be your problem. Alrighty. Let me see here. And I will recommend one thing. If you don't buy a bunch of different sewing feet for your machine, I will tell you one that you should invest in is a walking foot. This is one of probably the best investments I ever made, even for our class that we have here at the library. These are only like $12. This is an off-brand, but it works pretty good, actually. You don't have to get the name brands. Just make sure that whoever you're buying them from has a lot of good reviews, and that that's recommended for your machine also. The reason why I tell you that this is a good investment, you don't have to use it just for quilting. Anytime you've got something that's very bulky that you're working with, that is awesome. It makes working with it so much better. It pulls it through the machine a lot easier, and that's the whole point of the walking foot. This part up here, besides the feed dogs that are underneath here, they're both pulling the fabric through at the same time. So it's making sure the fabric on top and the fabric on bottom are both being pulled through together, so you don't have problems with things bunching together. And if you ever work with fabrics that are kind of silky and slick, or my husband actually has some work some shirts that are collared type shirts that are oh yeah, patches. That's another. I didn't think about patches. Are great too for the walking foot. Oh yeah, anything thick. But my husband has these new work shirts that they gave him that's made out of this really thin, kind of slick kind of material, and it has difficulty pulling it through and sewing correctly. So when I swapped over and got the walking foot on there, it was awesome. And then when I was doing something for a person that had they were doing a baby blanket that was a fuzzy baby blanket, but they were putting some of that satiny type material on doing around the edges of it with the satin type material. It works great on that too. I tried sewing without the walking foot with that satin material, and I was having like some material scooting this way and some scooting this way. They weren't going through together because it was folded over on the edges of it. So that works great for that too. So really awesome. If you were ever going to buy another sewing foot and you ever think that you're going to do anything, you know, like that besides quilting even, then in any thick type materials, this is really, really good to have. There's some other cool feet that you could get for your sewing machine, but that's probably the best investment one I've ever made. Now, I was going to show some other things, but if I want to cater to who's watching. So if anybody else has any questions about their machine, but I will say too, hey Mitzi, and Terry's watching too. Hey Terry. The extra fabric you keep around from your sewing projects, just throw them in a little basket. Have different types. I have some flannel and some fleece and stuff in there. You always want to use that leftover fabric to test your machine before you get started on your project. Even with quilting, take the leftover pieces that you've cut off and fold them together and run them through your machine, because that's a great way to test your tension, to see if it's sewing correctly before you get started, because it's a bummer whenever you start sewing and it's messing up on you, and it's the project that you're working on. You don't want your project to get messed up. So yeah, do that first. Just whatever type of fabric you have, it doesn't have to be the same color, as long as it's the same type. Like this is cotton, as long as you got some cotton, send it through, make sure. And another little thing that I like to do when I'm sewing is I will turn my knob until my needle is in my thread, or in my fabric, before I start sewing. I've noticed that this has helped a great deal on whenever I'm sewing, to just get started with it in there. But let's see, I guess nobody has any questions. I'm gonna run through, let's see, since no one has any questions, I'll just show the other bobbins and stuff real quick. All right, so we've got that, and then I'm going to show this one real quick. That's the drop-in bobbin, and those are a lot easier to do than the other ones, because you usually just pop this open, and when you're threading it, it's kind of like the same thing. You want your thread to be going this direction. You don't want it to be going behind it whenever you're loading it in the machine. So, and it's got photos here too on top showing you how to do it correctly. Let's move that one out. I know there's a little arrow that points this way, but that's after you drop your bobbin into it. It goes underneath this way. And these are pretty easy. I mean, once you do that part, you just turn your knob again, hold on to your thread, and then you just pull it out to get it out, and you'll have to get scissors. I wanted to just run through that real quick in case someone comes back later and watches the video and go, hey, you didn't cover my machine. Oops. It didn't do it. Oh, wait, there it is. Come on. It's hung up in there. Come on. There we go. As long as you got both of them out there, you're good. And you just pop it back on. So those are really the two basic ones. We've got one more that's got a drop-in bobbin on top. Let's see if all of my cords are wrapped around this thing I'm trying to move, this tripod. Okay. And this one is just another brother. It's just got a different kind of bobbin, but it's basically really, really similar to, except this one slides out this way, and it's going to have the same thing. You just have the thing that you're getting it under is right over here. Your thread you want it to go this direction, the same way. Let's see here. You just want to make sure that it's going in that direction. You drop it in, and it's a little bit harder to see on this one, but there's a little piece that it's going underneath, which I'm not getting it under. Nope, it's not happening. Come on. You are not cooperating. Come on. Well, I think it's because I got the camera in front of it that it's not. Let's see. Did I get it right? I can't tell. I don't think I got it through exactly right. Did I? Maybe. Let's find out. Oops. Yes, I did. There we go. Sometimes being able to see all this stuff with cameras in front of it are hard. Alright, so we got that one threaded too. I just wanted to run through that real quick in case somebody else comes back through and says, hey, you didn't do that one. But basically all your other stuff is the same as far as threading the top half. This one's got the bobbin on top. And you just follow your directions on where it tells you to how to thread it and everything, because it's got pictures and numbers on how to do it. This one's telling you how to do the winding your bobbin over here, and this one is showing you how to go over here for the bobbin area too. But this is the number one that doesn't have the black circle around it, and that's got the black circle, and that's showing you how to do the bobbin part. But I guess all of them, and they show you your number one with a picture and how to go down here and up and around just the same way as the other ones. So the modern ones are really, really similar. Let's see here. I'm going to not be able to get my whole thing over here. I was going to show you some basics real quick here at the end. So let me undo my camera from this light thing I have. Alright, I'm just going to take you over here real quick. I just wanted to cover some basics of things that you probably need to have on hand. Some really good stuff to have is you definitely want a flathead screwdriver, a small one, a short one like this, so you can get it up underneath there whenever you're changing your needles. Because if you get one that's too long, like say like that, you may not be able to get it up underneath there in order to undo the thing to take your needle out. And a flathead and a Phillips is always good to have. You can buy little sets like this, and you will really, really, really need some of these tweezers too, especially the turned ones like this that's not straight. That's very helpful on getting threads out of there. This is one of the plastic bobbins that you can have. Like I said, just be very careful about the size. You definitely want to have some seam rippers and some good fabric scissors. Whatever you do, don't use your fabric scissors for anything but your fabric, because that's going to make it cut not as well as it used to. Get some cheap little $2 scissors to cut paper and thread and other things, but just use these for your fabric only. And then it's always good to make an investment in some pinking shears. These are awesome. Really, really, they're a lot more expensive than regular scissors, but they are very awesome. They come in handy for different types of fabric that you're going to be using that phrase on the very edges. That helps a lot. And if you're working with projects that have corners or like curves on the edges, if you cut with this, instead of having to make the little notches that you make for your turns, this will do it for you because of the way that they're made. And those are really awesome. Always some markers that are water soluble. Those are great. And you'll occasionally need to have some Tailors chalk. I just have it in one of these little old Altoid tins. But this will be great for dark colored fabrics that you need to write on. I don't ever use the blue one, but the white one I do use a lot for that type of thing. And different types of pins are nice. Get the metal ends. We don't have the ones with the metal on the ball part because, not metal, but not plastic, the glass ones. If you ever are going to be ironing and you get your iron too close to these, it'll melt them. So you might want the glass ones for that. And the clips are really nice too to have on hand. And I always have extra needles, and there's different sizes that you need to pay attention to on here. See the numbers on there? That depends on what type of sewing that you're doing. And the best way to find out which ones are good for what, you go to your manual. And your manual will tell you at some point, I think it's usually towards the very, very back, and it looks like a different, they've got all languages in this one. But usually it's, let's see here, if I could show you real quick. And that's how I figured out what kind of needle to use when I was working with jersey material. And these are the directions that usually show you how to tell you what to do whenever your tension is off. Let's see. All right, threads. It'll tell you what type of fabric that you're using and what size needle. And this is the needle size on the side here. It's going to be really hard to... But it will tell you what type you're going to need, which is very, very helpful. And usually they'll have different sizes. But those numbers are the ones that are on your packaging here. And this one looks like it comes with 3 different types. And usually those are like you'll get universal ones that are for just basic sewing, but it's nice to get the ones that's got the different kinds. And some of my favorite things to cut with, even though I'm not a big quilter, having one of these mats and these types of rulers are awesome when it comes to exact measurements and straight edges, because I'm not real good at straight edges and so forth, and corners too, getting nice clean corners, because these will measure them out perfectly for you. And practicing with a rotary cutter is always great, because you're never really great with using it in the beginning, but the more you practice with them, the better you get. And it's so much faster cutting things up with one of them, especially if you're doing straight edges. When I've been doing some of the masks that I've made for my coworkers, I was able to use like one of these to do my measurements and get them cut out so much faster, because I just stacked the fabric on top of each other and just cut right through, and it was awesome. It cut the time in half. And having a good iron is always one of the things you want to pay attention to when investing in stuff for your sewing, because a good iron that heats up fast and also heats up really hot. Some of the basic ones don't heat up hot enough for when you want to use interfacing. Especially the interfacing that's got like the glue on one side and it sticks to your fabric. If you don't have one that heats up good, then you're going to have a lot of problems with getting your interfacing to attach to your fabric. So you just think about those type of things on whenever you're purchasing, wanting to purchase different things for sewing. All right, I think, and besides having a needle and thread too, you always want to have some of those on hand there's always, if you do bags, you're going to have to do a little bit of hand sewing to close those up sometimes, not all the time. And that's basically it for this week. Unless anyone else has any questions, this will be it. And then if y'all want to suggest, I'm going to switch this around. If y'all want to suggest anything that you'd like me to cover next week, I'd be happy to do that. I'm thinking about different types of sewing, working with different things. Do y'all want to know about how to do ruffles, how to work with elastic? I'm not sure. I've done a little bit of stuff with elastic, but not a lot. If any other questions you guys might have, just post it to the end of this video in the comment section, and I'll be sure to cover it next time. I'll be doing this again next Friday at 1. So if you can think of anything between now and then, just let me know in the comments, or you can send a message through the instant messenger to the library, and just I guess title it to Miss Opal. That'll work, and that I should get it, or that if someone else reads it, they'll be sure to let me know. So it doesn't seem like anyone has any questions, I guess. So it's been about an hour. That worked out pretty good. So I'll talk to y'all next week. Until then, bye.